We are joined on this episode by an accomplished director of photography, a member of the Canadian Society of Cinematographers, who has not one but two Raven Banner features that just saw their world premieres at Fantasia International Film Festival, they being the horror thriller The Breach and the noirish fight drama The Fight Machine. He is also the DP of Paper Street Pictures' upcoming feature from director Emily Hagen's Sorry About the Demon. He is Eric O. Eric, thank you so much for joining us on the program here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, really excited to talk to you about all things cinematography. But first up, we always start by asking what gave you the bug for film? Was there a particular movie, a person in your life that got you interested in storytelling and writing and in movies in general?
Sure. I guess I'll start at the beginning. I first really enjoyed the moving picture, I guess, by when I was quite young, watching documentaries. One of my favorite documentaries was The Underworld Adventures of Jacques Cousteau. I was, 8 to 10 years old, and I would religiously watch that and love the show. And in fact, I was, for many years, wanted to actually get into marine biology. But I got my first stills camera when I was about 11 and started taking pictures then. My dad was a hobbyist scuba diver as well as a photographer, so I kind of caught the bug from him as well as I went on a lot of trips with him. So, he introduced me to photography, and I did a lot of street photography, and as well I did some underwater stuff, and that's kind of how I first got into the whole image making process, I guess. And then that kind of just was a hobby for me for many years. And, like everybody else, high school, university, didn't know what to do. Applied for psychology, went into psychology, but after the first year, I knew it wasn't for me. So I dropped out of university then. And it was actually my mom that said, hey, you've always been interested in photography. Why don't you do some film courses? So I'm like, oh, yeah, actually, that sounds quite cool and quite interested in that. So I actually took some night courses at Ryerson University in Toronto, and that really got the bug in me. And then based on a couple of films that I made and my photography portfolio, I applied to Ryerson University, the full-time program, the undergraduate program for film. I don't know how, but I guess they saw something in me and I was accepted. And I guess that's the path I started on. In my third year, I started working in the film industry in Toronto as a camera assistant. Well, first, you do whatever you can to get on set, be a PA, I was doing craft services on music videos, making sandwiches. I was art department, painting walls, a PA. But I knew camera was where I wanted to go to, and that was my focus. So that's kind of where I started positioning myself. And after a few years, I started working as a second camera assistant, mainly in commercials, and worked under two focus pullers that were quite instrumental in my development as a camera assistant, Kelly Mason and Monica Godard. And I did many, many commercials with them. And that's kind of how I got into the whole film industry.
So it sounds like you were kind of always behind the camera, or at least that was kind of the centering of your film experience, whether through still photography and then eventually like moving pictures. When you were kind of making your own films, did you ever consider or dabble in any other disciplines within film, or was it always reinforced that being behind the camera and cinematography was your true passion?
Yeah, cinematography was actually my true passion because I really enjoyed it because it's a mix of creative and technical. I do enjoy the technical aspects of it, but I also really enjoy the creative aspect of that. So a lot of my fellow classmates wanted to be the director and things like that. And, I guess that's where, when a young undergraduate in film school, you always think, oh yeah, directing. But for me, it was always cinematography. And it's something that I always felt very strongly about.
So you got started in Toronto. You got a few gigs in Toronto. I know you're well traveled. We'll get into some of your many ventures across the globe here.
Yes.
What was it that finally took you to Asia, which you ended up staying a stint for?
Well, I was working primarily in the commercial industry in Toronto as a camera assistant, and then when Steadicam was also something that I really enjoyed because a friend of mine was doing it and he let me try it out. He's also a very renowned DP. His name's Jeremy Benning. And I used to assist for him. And, I loved the Steadicam and how you can move the camera and how much freedom it gave you and the kind of shots that you could compose. And it's something that's very unique because most of the time when you're dealing with a moving camera, it's a coordination of several people, whether you're a dolly or a crane or any other form except for a Steadicam. Of course, handheld is it's just a camera operator, but in terms of smooth camera moves, Steadicam was something that really intrigued me. So I did a workshop. I took the Tiffin, at that time it was not Tiffin yet, but I took the Steadicam workshop 5 days. And then that's when I started embarking on a Steadicam career. At the same time also, that gave me also the confidence to start to push myself as a cinematographer. And I, started shooting low budget music videos and things like that while also operating Steadicam. And then in 2008, I was offered a documentary in Bali, to shoot a feature-length documentary in Bali. And that was going to be over 5 months. So I jumped at the chance, of course, went out there. And after that documentary wrapped, I thought to myself, Asia is kind of cool. I've always been interested in maybe, trying my hand out there. And so I decided to start marketing myself to commercial houses mainly. And after about a month or two, the gigs started coming in and I figured, okay, this is good. I'll try it out for a year or two and ended up staying for 8 years in Asia.
And what was the majority of the work that you did over those 8 years? Did you progress into becoming a cinematographer? It sounded like that was the direction you were headed from the documentary. And
yeah, the thing about the industry in Toronto back then was that you can kind of get typecasted. So I was starting to be known as a Steadicam operator, and I was actually getting more gigs as a Steadicam operator than a DP. So I wanted to also, reinvent myself. And that's part of the reason why I also jumped at the chance of taking this gig out in Bali, because I figured, I go out, shoot this, maybe build a commercial reel for myself, and then come back to Toronto and start pushing myself more as a DP and not so much as a Steadicam operator. And it's funny because even, after I'd been out in Asia for 3-4 years, I would still be getting emails from Toronto saying, hey, are you available? I got a 3-day Steadicam job. I need you on. And I'm like, no, sorry, guys. I'm out in Asia now. And, unless you want to fly me all the way back to Toronto, which I don't think is feasible because there's many talented Steadicam ops out there, I'm going to have to pass. So that's kind of, how I also committed into cinematography and pushing myself as a DP. But yeah, predominantly my work was in commercials, but, storytelling is where my heart was always at. And after many, many years of working in commercials as a camera assistant, as a Steadicam operator, and then as a DP, I really wanted to focus more on narrative. And while out in Asia, I shot 2 or 3 films, features, and operated Steadicam on a bunch. And that also really further reinforce the feeling that, yes, narrative is where I want to get into. Commercials is great, love commercials and all, but it's a whole different thing. And at the end of the day, it's not really storytelling in that sense of creating an environment, creating a world, if you will, where you can develop characters and develop the story arc and visually convey a story or a feeling or emotion. Because commercials, at the end of the day, it's like 30 seconds, maybe a minute long, and so you can't really develop as much in a commercial storytelling method, I guess.
You're tapping around a lot of things we want to touch on, which is the DP being one of those department heads that truly is that blend of technique and artistic vision, where some are just one or the other. And you truly do have to have kind of like both of those bones in your body to be a great DP. And you said it again, storytelling and feel, which is so much of what cinema is. So we want to talk a little bit just about broader cinematography too. Like, in your words, what would you tell people cinematography is? What do people get wrong about it? Tell folks out there like why it's more than just gels and filters.
Yeah, for me, I get a lot of questions from up and coming and aspiring cinematographers in terms of like, hey, I'm looking to be a DP, what gear should I get? Or what's kind of, what's the in thing in terms of lighting and what's the camera moves and things like that. And my one thing that I always tell them is that cinematography is great, but ultimately cinematography is here to serve the story. It's about the story and it's about the emotion and the feeling that you want to convey across in the story. So it's not about the toys or that looks cool or, that's a cool move for the sake of it being a cool move or a cool lighting setup. It has to serve the story. if it's not serving the story, then it's just kind of, in a way, egotistical, right? It's just something that you want to, it's more, you're not really serving the story anymore. You're now more about, oh, let's make this look cool for my reel, or, it's, for example, like a film like Matrix, it's got some great special effects, it's got some great camera moves, but you try to transpose that into a dramatic film, it's not going to work because it's out of place. Those techniques and that lighting and that look serve the story for that film, right? So, and every film you have to approach every film as its own thing. And you have to understand the underlying emotion and feel and what the director wants. Because the second thing that I also want to touch upon is that as a cinematographer, you're here to realize the director's vision. Whatever the director wants or whatever they envision, of course, it's a collaborative process. So you do have an input in it. But ultimately, it's there to tell the story that they want to tell visually. And that is, that is very important. I feel that sometimes some younger cinematographers may not understand that or may not get that.
I'm curious more about that too. In kind of the inverse of it is, are there things that you wish kind of younger directors might have more knowledge about coming into a production in terms of the way they can better communicate their vision with a cinematographer? Or maybe, whether it's more technical knowledge or something else entirely, are there things that directors can do to kind of improve the chances of having a successful collaboration and ultimately seeing their vision come to life?
That's a good question. Well, what I feel is that as a cinematographer, you have to be kind of a chameleon. You have to adapt to various directors that you work with, and you also have to try to get into their heads. I've worked with directors who are just starting out and have very little knowledge of the whole process, to very, very experienced directors where they can even tell you, like, yes, specifically, I would love this to be a 50 mil push into this, and from a medium wide into a close up, that specific. As a cinematographer, if a director does not know how to convey the ideas, then you have to find ways in order to get what's in their head out onto either a paper or through discussion. And one of the ways that I find is very useful is through references, whether it's photography, whether it's art, whether it's other films. That's a good way to then find a common ground. And that's also a good way to then start understanding what's in the director's head.
Right. Mood and tone comps are always helpful. Visual aids, vision boards, even anything beyond just definitely. A sketch storyboard can go a long way.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've worked with directors that did not have a storyboard like on films before, and it's fine. Some directors have every scene storyboarded out, and most of the times these directors they're not rigid in the sense of it has to be like that. I've yet to come across a director where no, it has to be like that. Yes, I'm sure there are directors out there that are like that, but in my experience, it's always discussion. They're like, oh yeah, I would like this. The cinematographer then can suggest, okay, I understand the mood and feel of this scene and what you're trying to convey, but maybe it's better instead of, shot, reverse shot, let's just do a slow dolly push in, cover the whole scene that way. And because this gives you the emotion that you're trying to convey across. And then, oh yeah, that's great. I really like that idea. And they embrace it. Or they say, yes, I see what you're getting at, but maybe we can do a mix of two. So it's very much a collaboration, and it's very much a constant discussion with the director, even on set, and even, all through pre-production and during production, it's constantly changing. And that's part of the reason why I love filmmaking this much, is because everything is planned very well. Everything is planned down to the T sometimes, but then you all understand that there is still that certain serendipitous moments that you have to embrace, and certain things that you're like, oh wow, you know what? Because of this great location, okay, let's do this shot instead of what we had planned before. And that's what makes filmmaking exciting and invigorating, because of that ability to just adjust and change gears and like, yeah, great, let's do this. I'll give you an example. On a Fight Machine, we had many fights had been choreographed by our stunt coordinator, and we had many rehearsals, and Andrew and I, the director, would say, okay, plan out shots accordingly. Okay, how are we going to cover this? The angles we need to be to sell the hits and sell the punches. And we've been doing this, and we had, I think it was about 3 or 4 days scheduled for just all fight sequences, all different fights, different rounds, and different fights between the characters. And I believe it was like day 2 or day 3 of shooting our fight scenes when the director came to me the day before and said, "Hey, look at this reference." And he showed me Creed 2. And there's a great scene in Creed 2 where it was all done in a single take with a Steadicam. So no cuts, continuous shot, and it ran for the entire round. And the director said to me, "Isn't this great? Can we do this?" And he brought this to me, I think, on the wrap of the day that we were shooting. And we were going to shoot this scene the next day. I said, "This looks amazing. I love the idea of doing a one take. We were going to do it handheld instead because that's what we had agreed and discussed. But yeah, let's go for it. I'm willing to try, and let's do a few rehearsals because there's a lot of spots I need to be in order to make this work." And I believe the scene was about almost 2 minutes long. So if you're shooting the whole scene and at the end of at 1 minute 45, something doesn't work, you're going to have to do the whole thing again because we're not cutting. So, it's these things that really I love, where it's like you throw me a curveball and I love the idea. I'm like, okay, let's go for it. Let's try it. And that was one of my favorite shots in the film. We did, I believe, like 7 or 8 takes. And I believe out of those, I think 4 takes that were all usable, and it was a fantastic shot. Adrenaline was pumping. Andrew loved it. I loved it. And, to me, that's the epitome of filmmaking, to have everything planned, but to be able to roll with the punches and still execute the changes that you decide to go with.
That's good to hear. And you literally led into a question I had upcoming, which was about that very thing, the Fight Machine, which just premiered at Montreal's Fantasia Festival, as folks are hearing this. Bare knuckle boxing sequences, I wanted to ask, that was a question I was going to go with, was, there's plenty of amazing boxing films. I was wondering if you and the director had indirectly or directly referenced one, but you did mention Creed. Was there maybe some other challenges in selling that fight sequence or blocking it out? Or maybe how else did you guys prep for shooting, beyond looking at Creed or maybe looking at some other films?
Well, the interesting part is that, and it's funny because I said, yes, it's good to have references. It's good to look at other films and how to execute. But there's also a fine line between having too much pushing you into one direction and not then having your own voice. And right. So we kind of decided that, okay, Creed, we only actually watched Creed for that one specific shot, that one continuous take. Other than that, we kind of Wayne Wells was the stunt coordinator and he did a fantastic job. Him and his boys did a fantastic job of choreographing the fight sequences. So what we did was Andrew and I, the director, our process was that we went to all the rehearsals, the fight rehearsals, where the stunt team was working with the actors so that they would get the choreography down. And while we're doing that, Andrew and I would be just shooting on our phones, all the hits, where they're going to be. And then we would discuss, okay, camera needs to be here to sell this hit. Okay, how are we going to cover this? And so we had every fight planned out and knew where each thing was going to be, which were the moments, which were the key points that the camera had to be at a specific angle to sell the hits. And so we already had by the time we went into production, we had a very good understanding of how we're going to cover the fight sequence. And we kind of made it our own. We wanted it to be something of our own because it's bare knuckle boxing. It's supposed to be an underground, in a barn, bare knuckle boxing. So, it's something that has not been done a lot to my knowledge. So we wanted to give it its own energy and its own feel. So we had decided that a lot of it will be handheld, and also that gives me the flexibility while, and we shot 2 cameras for that. So I would be in the ring, handheld, and the second camera would be sort of hidden behind the crowd around the ring on a longer lens. So we knew that, okay, and we broke down the fight into sections. So, okay, section 1 is from this point to this point. Section 2 is from this point to that point. So we knew that, okay, in section 1, B camera would have to be over there and I would have to be over here. Section 2, B camera would have to change positions to get into a different spot in the crowd, and I would be over here. And again, it wasn't just that we would cover specialty shots that we wanted, certain hits, certain moves, like one the protagonist in it. He has this strength that he doesn't know, his specific technique on how he rotates his hips and how he plants his foot. So we knew that we needed to get elements of that to convey across the feel that, the idea that he has this power punch, this crazy knockout punch that, that basically sends one of the characters into a coma.
I love hearing about the process too of breaking it up into sections and kind of mapping it out very strategically. I wanted to talk about another film, the second film that's also playing at Fantasia, The Breach. This being a very genre-oriented program and me being a horror fan, I was excited to hear about this. I'm a fan of Nick Cutter, the author, and I understand The Breach is based off of one of his stories. And I know his stories tend to have a lot of body horror elements and are pretty gnarly. So when shooting some of the gore or the special effects, how much work goes into pulling those off and making prosthetics and those effects really sell on camera?
Yeah, the thing about horror is that, especially indie horror, is you're always dealing with budgetary constraints. So you have to be wise in terms of where you're going to put the money in terms of making it look good on the screen. So for certain key creatures that we had, it was full body prosthetics. Also, the director, Rodrigo, he wanted the creatures to move in a specific way, in a very kind of like disjointed. So we actually got special talent performers, not just stunt guys, to play some of the key creatures in terms of how they walk and all. The prosthetic part is always tricky because you need a good AD for that to give it enough time, because there's always something. The performer is in a full body prosthetic, and that takes time to put on. It's uncomfortable. It's not exactly cool because you're wearing latex and silicone, so you can heat up quite a bit. So you have to give time for the whole process. It's okay, we need to cut now. Our performer needs to have a drink. He needs to take off the mask. And then that, okay, he's going to take off the mask. It's going to be a 20-minute reset. So you need to have a good AD to be able to say, okay, while he's doing that, we can shoot some of this here, and so you can maximize your time like that, especially on an indie budget and on an indie film with limited time and resources. In terms of the special effects, we also had mapped out basically what we were going to try to get in camera and what will be augmented with VFX. And most of it was in camera, for the exception of like gunshots, because we didn't want any live rounds on set. We're not using live ammo or blanks or anything like that. It was all going to be VFX augmented. So muzzle flashes, things like that was all VFX. No shots were fired in it. So there's a scene where the head explodes and blood splatters against a back of a wall. You need time to prep all that and get it right. And then, and if the shot doesn't work or the splatter is not big enough, the director wants it bigger, then you also have to give time for reset. So it's a fine balance of time management, resource management, and also, letting people have their time to do what they need. As much as we want to hurry, the SFX guys need time to prep the blood splatter packs and the costuming. And for example, Natalie Brown, she's one of the actresses in it. She was 3 hours in a chair to put on this prosthetic on her body. So all these factors have to be discussed prior. Your AD needs to be good at time management so that you can say, okay, well, it's 3 hours. What are we going to do? Are we going to do a pre-call? Are we going to shoot other things before? Because there's so many, as I'm sure you guys know and a lot of people know, there's so many factors to that in terms of like, we can't just pre-call an actor because now they're going to work like a 16-hour day and, that's going to go into crazy overtime. So it's a fine balance of logistics, technical, and creative.
As a seasoned DP, you always have stuff in your mind you can shoot. Do you offer that up, or do you hope that they have, the resources and some options, the AD come and say, well, we have these inserts we can grab while that's going on? Or are you one of those people that's like, let me just keep shooting because I can get something pretty?
Yeah. My style, because also I've done documentaries, and I love documentary filmmaking because that's a very different language and that's a very different workflow in terms of how you have to approach the subject and how you shoot. It's not as regimented, I guess, as feature filmmaking, and you have to kind of understand the moment. So I'm one of those DPs that if I see a moment and we're not rolling, it could be just an actor in full makeup and all that, and they're just waiting, but there's something that I see that could be used, I will grab it. I will definitely grab it. And I will not like say, okay, guys, let's stop. I will just do it because that's the moment that you want to get. And that candid moment is sometimes golden because one of the things that I say a lot to my directors is that it's great to have all your scenes covered, but you need those shots to give yourself breathing room for whether it's a transition from a scene to scene or whether it's a shot of a hand tapping on a table to convey across the idea that the character is impatient. You need those, what I call interstitial shots. You kind of like, shots that are not necessarily planned and not exposition, but it furthers the story and the plot. So I'm always on the lookout for those moments. And if I have a chance, I will shoot it. And then that comes also down to having a good AD, because if you have a good AD that understands how you work and understands also, the whole time management thing, they'll come over to you and whisper in your ear, hey, Eric, we've got some time now. You think there's something we can shoot? What about this? I say, yeah, great. Let's do this. Let's do that. And oh, wait, give me a second. I see a cool moment here. Can I shoot that? Yeah, go for it. So, it's very much a collaborative thing. And I find that some of the best ADs I work with are very much aware, have a lot of situational awareness, so that they understand it's not just, okay, guys, okay, sound ready, roll sound, camera and all that. It's that blend of almost narrative filmmaking meets documentary filmmaking, where you're kind of in the moment and you try to grab that moment, because that moment could be gone in a second and then you've lost it. And sometimes if you tell the actor, say, oh, just wait, I'm going to shoot. And you take them out of the moment, it's not the same. It doesn't have that authenticity, I guess, for lack of a better word, that you could get when they're unaware. And again, this all has to serve the story. And as a cinematographer, it's very, very important to understand the story and the subtext and all on what goes on in the emotional beats and what's happening within the story.
Absolutely. But I'm glad you kind of mentioned it. Not only sometimes when the directors wait that extra 5+ seconds to call cut, because sometimes you get some help in the editing room later with those bits, the grabbing them right before they're on, if you will, and getting those natural reactions sometimes also can help in an edit when you just need a reverse shot or you need a reaction shot. Sometimes their unawareness is some of the most human stuff they do. Not to slight actors. I'm not saying they're all aliens. Some of them are very human, but some of them are also aliens. But yeah, those little bits like that are very lovely in the editing room later on.
Definitely. And, it's something that I tell my focus pullers also, I said, and there's not any slight against any AD or anything, but I always tell them, okay, when AD calls cut, just give me a quick look before you cut the camera. I mean, unless it's a scene that we know, okay, it's gonna run like this. Or if I see something that happens, in the first take, and I say, okay, I'll tell my focus puller, okay, don't cut yet. Let it roll for the extra 5-10 seconds after the AD calls cut or after the director calls cut, because we got some golden moments here. Let me just roll that through a little bit. And yes, editors sometimes come back to me and say, you know what, those moments are great because, as you say, the actor's not on and it's very natural. And it's sometimes what you need to have those cutaways, those moments where you're trying to convey a feeling.
Once again, that's what it's about. Feeling. Movie's supposed to make you feel something. We were fortunate to have you as the cinematographer on Paper Street's upcoming horror comedy, Sorry About the Demon, which we'd mentioned. It was shot in the height of the pandemic in a bubble, in a lockdown hotel, to be exact, up in Toronto or outside Toronto. But you shot a good bit during COVID times here. We wanted to ask, what have you found to be the biggest challenge just shooting in these last couple of years with all the restrictions?
Well, the challenge was always with COVID was always the testing, the actual logistics of that. We're having to be tested, every 2 days, every 3 days. That was, and the whole process being slowed down because what we had basically is we all had various armbands, color-coded armbands. So, for example, the production crew, they had red armbands, so they were not allowed to come on set, except for a few key people. They were always the ones that had contact with the outside world, so to speak, whether suppliers, things like that. Most of the crew were in yellow armbands, so we were not allowed to come in direct contact with actors. And then people like the hair and makeup and wardrobe would have green armbands because they are the ones coming in contact with the actors. And so they are not allowed to come in contact with us. So, all these little things that slows down the process. Plus, the whole thing of now your interaction with my interaction, because I'm very much a hands-on kind of person. I love to operate my own camera and I love interacting with the actors, of course, without stepping on toes for the director. And I'm always very aware of that. I'm always say, hey, do you mind if I have a suggestion, for example? It could be just a raised eyebrow that could just give you that poignant moment, right, at the end of a monologue or whatever it is. And I might suggest that. So, being that kind of hands-on DP, I found it very, in a way, restrictive because, you had to keep a certain distance from the actors and things like that. But on the plus side of it is that I shot 3 films during the pandemic. And the plus side of it is that we're all bubbled. So we're all actually living in the same hotel. Production took over the hotel for all cast, crew, and everybody. We all lived in there. You wake up in the morning, you walk to work basically because your set was just built in the hotel or just outside of the hotel. And that was great. And then at the end of the day, you kind of you felt the crew all felt more like a family because it's not like, okay, it's a wrap. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow. Everyone goes home and, does their thing. We're all in the same spot. We're all tested constantly. So we all knew that, okay, this is it. This is our family for the next month and a half, 2 months, whatever it is. So we all kind of hung out, and in a way, it felt there was more camaraderie and more of a familiar, a family feel to it than, at the end of the day, you punch out and you go home and that's it. You don't see these people anymore. So yeah, it was a good experience overall. I actually enjoyed it, barring the whole inconvenience of having to wear face shields and masks and the testing and not coming in close proximity with various people. I would say it was actually an excellent experience. The whole bubble model of filmmaking is great. So much so that we even had our editor on set. And it's great having an editor on set because they're basically a day behind. They're taking your camera dailies, they're cutting it, and the director loved it because then they can see, on a rough assembly edit, say, I could use this other shot. So, then you talk to the AD and say, okay, great. Yes, schedule is, I need this quick pickup here. And being able to watch, not just your rushes at the end of the day, but an assembly edit of what you shot was invaluable to me as a cinematographer because then, I could have discussions with the editor and saying, how's things? How do you feel things are covered? Am I missing anything? And they're saying, no, your coverage is great. You're giving me a wealth of stuff. I love how you shoot. And I'm like, great, perfect. So you're on the right track. There's no surprises. There's no possibility like, you know what, this didn't work. We're going to have to come back and reshoot this. Or, So in that sense, it was fantastic. And in my mind, it actually, even with all the time-consuming COVID protocols that you had to go through, it was actually much more efficient use of time for production and post-production.
I imagine it's almost too the experiences like summer camp, or maybe reminds you of shooting films with your friends, where everybody just all holes up together. So I can see why that was challenging, but also a positive experience.
Yes.
So besides COVID, what are some of, thinking back on your career, is there a particular location that was really challenging or a setup in particular required a lot of rigging maybe, or just maybe the dynamics of the environment made it a big challenge?
Yeah, for Sorry About the Demon, what we had decided was that basically what we did is production rented a Holiday Inn just outside of Toronto. So we took over pretty much the whole Holiday Inn. There was a wing that was separate, that was still open to public, but we're in the middle of a pandemic, so there was not that many other guests there. Now, the challenge for that was that our so-called studio, which was basically a huge atrium, was our studio. And we had something like 4 or 5 sets built there. So, me working with the production designer, art director, Josh, I always told him, these are kind of my requirements. These are all sets. We're supposed to be in a house, so we're going to have lots of windows. I need space to light. I need a certain amount of distance to put my lights and things like that. But because of the physicality of the actual space, we had limitations. And another thing was that this atrium had, it was basically like a giant glass, like a glass house. So a lot of the night scenes we had, in order to control the light, whether it's night or day, I had to black out all the sets. We had basically 2 days of pre-light, which was barely enough because the first day and a half was just my grip team blacking out all the sets. And I can't even remember. We had a lot of blacks just to black out everything. And that was challenging in that sense. And not having the physical space to place your lights at a good distance from the windows. Those are the 2 biggest challenges for Sorry About the Demon.
Wow. And even outside of Sorry About the Demon, let's talk about the inverse of that question. What is the coolest location you've ever filmed?
Wow.
There's probably a lot in your travels around the world.
Yeah, I filmed in I believe it was I had gone to Georgia, not Georgia, US, but Georgia, the Russian country, Georgia. I went there to shoot a Samsung commercial. Part of the reason of us going there because of this great location, which was this opera house that had just been, I believe it was like 3 years under renovation and had just opened. And basically we were like the first ever to shoot in there or to even be in that space. It was a fantastic space. But of course, being, an historical building and all that, there's many things that you can and cannot do. And that was in itself was challenging because also in terms of the physicality of mounting lights, we have to be careful not to damage anything. Everything is just freshly, it's like the paint is just dried kind of thing. So we had to be extra cautious, but being on a commercial, you have limited time, and and of course it's you're there to please the client and the agency. So it was tricky in the sense of like you had to deliver what the client and agency wanted, at the same time respect the space that you were in and the local culture. And that's something also because I've shot in a lot of different places. I've shot all throughout Southeast Asia. I've been to Kazakhstan, all through Canada. And that is probably one of the biggest thing. And it's not even a filmmaking thing per se. It's understanding the local culture and working within that environment. I've learned very early on that you cannot come in and just dictate how you do things. Oh, this is how I do it, so this is how I dictate things. No, you have to understand the local work culture and work within those constraints. And, filmmaking also is very much people management, understanding human psychology. I'll give you an example. I was shooting a commercial out in Jakarta and, big crew, big commercial. The director I'd worked with for many years and, we had a huge shot list and of course, not enough time. It was a scheduled, I think, 18-hour day for our first day. And the first shot of the day was a Steadicam shot. Now, at this point, I had stopped operating Steadicam, so I was just there as a DP. And it was not a complex shot, but the operator, who was a very experienced operator in Jakarta, was just not quite getting the timing that the director wanted. The director knew that I was a Steadicam operator, and in fact, I had operated on commercials that we had shot together in the past. He kind of, gives me a nudge. He goes, "Hey, dude, it's the first shot, and we're already getting behind. Do you think you can operate this?" And I said to him, "Brother, let me work with him." I said, "Let me work with him and he'll get the shot. Don't worry." Because I understood that if I was to, here I am, I'm a foreigner. The director is also a foreigner. We're in Jakarta. This is a very experienced Steadicam operator and he's in front of a huge crew, all people that he's worked with and knows. It's the first shot of the day. If I, as the DP, a foreign DP was to come, take his equipment and operate the shot, that would be very demoralizing for him. And that is not a way to work with a crew member. I still needed him for another, 17 hours because almost everything was Steadicam. And I did not want to crush his spirit, so to speak, in the first shot because I understand, if I was in his position and this foreign DP was here and I couldn't get the shot and he takes my gear and operates it, I would feel very demoralized. So I understood that and said, okay. So I worked with him. I said, okay, at this point, you need to pan. At this point, okay, now adjust your end framing because actors not always hit their marks. Adjust your frame so that the director gets the frame that he wants, which is with the close-up. If the actor is too close, then stop sooner. Don't just go by your marks. And we worked through it, and he got the shot. And after that, I had a very productive crew member that got all the shots we needed for the rest of the day instead of demoralizing this person for the first shot. And then once you get demoralized, your heart and soul is not there anymore. You don't feel like, okay, your passion's, it's kind of like the wind's gone out of your sails. So, it's very much understanding human psychology and people management. And that's, something that's not maybe talked about as much as a role as a DP, because as a DP, you're kind of like, you're the leader of the technical crew. So you have to set by example by remaining calm and also by people management.
I love that story. And it is so true. I think any leader of any department, I think the people management is a big part of their role, especially when you're talking about a creative process that's fused with a lot of technical elements. In addition to things just go wrong. It's hard to pull these things off. The actors don't hit their marks. The lighting changes, the sun moves, the cloud, all these things are outside of your control. And yes, the one thing we can have a control over is how we respond to situations. And love to hear your story of kind of using it as an opportunity to lift someone up. And then you have an amazing collaborator with you the rest of the shoot. And that's going to save you a lot of time down the road, even though your instinct might be in that moment to just get the shot. So I think that's great advice, for other people.
Yes.
And that kind of leads into our last question of the formal interview portion, which you've given a lot of great pieces of advice for filmmakers in a variety of positions on set. But, speaking to the budding cinematographers out there, are there any kind of last words of wisdom that you want to impart for them to kind of advance their craft and their careers?
I guess the biggest takeaway for me is that you're always learning. For me, even I mean, I still do pro bono work from time to time. I recently did a short film for a director that's from LA, but she's doing her master's in Barcelona. And through a mutual, through another director, she contacted me, said, "Hey, would you want to shoot my film?" So I still do that kind of thing. For me, is that you will never stop learning. If you feel that, if I was to come on the set and feel that like, okay, well, I'm the most experienced here. I've got 20, close to 30 years of experience. Some of these people are like, not even 2 years experience. But if I was to come on set with that attitude, that's starting off on the wrong foot. You need to be open and you need to listen and you need to still feel that there's still things that you can learn, whether it's a technical thing or whether it's something that's not technical. I guess the biggest thing I would tell budding cinematographers is that there's a wealth of technical knowledge out there that you can get from anywhere from YouTube to books to workshops to courses. But one thing that is most important that you need to work on is your people skills and understanding the big picture. As the example I gave you about the Steadicam operator, and you said it so succinctly. If I was just focused on let's get in the shot because we're losing time and not stepping back to see the big picture and understanding not to crush this person's spirit, then I would have made that mistake and said, you know what? No, let's give it to me and let me get the shot. And because I'm too tunnel vision and too focused, you need to, even when you feel there's a tempest and a hurricane going on around you, that's the time when you most need to take that step back and to review and look at the big picture. And that is something that is probably the hardest thing to learn. And that's something that will come with experience. But if you're aware of that and you go into every shoot understanding that, then you're already ahead of the game. Technical knowledge, there's so much technical knowledge out there that you can get from books and anywhere. But these things, these little nuggets, these little gems of people skills and management and how to behave is very important. And self-awareness is super important because at the end of the day, it is an art form, but this is the only art form where it's a collaborative art form. Sometimes that so-called lowly PA, quote unquote, do not look upon that PA as a lowly PA and do not order them around. That PA one day could be the line producer that hires you, or that PA maybe has a great idea that says, you know what, that's fantastic. That's a great idea. So don't get stuck into positions. Always remember that everyone's got feelings and everyone's an individual person. And we have to respect everybody that way. I know, when I was starting out as a camera assistant, working with PAs in commercials, 3 years later, they're those PAs that are calling me for jobs because they remember an incident where I don't even remember anymore, where I had a kind word for them or helped them out on something, took the time out of my day to help them out on something. And they're like, man, you were great. And, because of that, you've endeared me and I'm going to always call you to hire you. Skills can always be learned, but half of the battle of getting gigs, of being hired in the next job is how you are as a person, how you work with other people. Your attitude on set is so important. And these are one golden nugget that I got early on as a camera trainee / second AC was my focus point. And he, it was not in a disrespectful way. He said to me, says, you have 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth. Use it in that proportion. Observe, listen. There's no stupid questions, but also choose your time for your questions. But yes, watch and listen. That's very important. And I say, you know what? I took that to heart and and to this day, I still do that.
All right. Are you ready to kick off the Rapid Fire 15? This is basically a series of fun sort of questions that will help us get to know you a little bit better, but don't overthink them. It's not a test. Say the first thing that comes to your mind.
Sure.
All right. First one. What movie do you think you have seen the most in your life?
Sound of Music.
Wow. I wasn't expecting that. I don't know why, but...
That was because when I was a kid, I don't know, I guess somehow I loved it. I probably have seen it like 50 times back in the VHS days.
Nice. What was the first film that really scared you, maybe stuck with you or gave you a nightmare when you were younger?
Alien.
Good one.
That is a good one.
What is your all-time favorite documentary?
Oh my gosh. All the BBC natural history documentaries, I would say. It's hard to narrow one down, but I would say all the BBC natural history documentaries.
Well, I
I
thought
also
you'd go
do
with
like,
Cousteau after you talked about how much you watched it in your youth.
yeah, I mean, I do love them, but the BBC ones are like the next level because, you know, they took filmmaking to the next level in terms of the techniques they used to capture wildlife. That was really, that's something else. You know, using modern like cable camera systems and things like that in a documentary setting. And that was like, wow, that's cool.
What would you say is your favorite example of great cinematography? Like a film that you maybe cite when you're trying to explain to someone what incredible composition and lighting and movement is, or maybe a cinematographer you would cite, if not a film.
Oh gosh, what's the name of the film? It's on the tip of my tongue. Barry Lyndon, Stanley Kubrick's
Right.
Barry Lyndon. Beautiful film. Beautiful framing, all natural light, all lit with candles. That is a feat in itself back in the day because film stocks were not that fast. In fact, I believe Kubrick had special lenses manufactured for that to be able to open up to like 0.95 T, you know, of a T-stop kind of thing. It's like unheard of back in then.
Yeah, the film cinematography that took foot candles literally.
Yeah, exactly.
What would you say is your all-time favorite director? Or who would you say is your all-time favorite director?
Oh my gosh. Fincher?
Good choice.
How about, as you mentioned, still photography from your father and yourself? Do you have a favorite still photographer, or if not, maybe a favorite type of still photography?
I would say Ansel Adams was very instrumental for me because of his photography techniques, his whole zone system. But I would say that, yeah, Ansel Adams.
What song or film or any piece of pop culture, really, could be a book, a photograph, what piece of art makes you emotional or brings you to tears?
I would say I'm terrible with names. It's an artist. He came up with chiaroscuro, the whole Italian movement of light and dark, a use of that. Caravaggio, yes, Caravaggio. His paintings are like a cinematographer's dream in terms of use of shadow and light and the emotion that he conveyed. It's something else. It's something that one of the things that film school really was great for me is understanding, studying art history and how it relates to image making and photography and cinematography. And Caravaggio's work really, really stuck with me.
Yeah, his stuff is like, once you know it and you spot it in a museum or something, it's pretty iconic stuff. And I'm a fan as well.
Yeah.
Says the guy who also could not pull his name like you. But yes. Do you have a favorite concert you've attended, or maybe like a very memorable concert experience?
Well, not so much. Well, it's funny. I actually, when I was a teenager, I actually lined up, I believe it was like 2 days to get Rolling Stones tickets. I ended up not going to Rolling Stones concert. Fast forward to 20 odd years later, and I'm actually shooting a Rolling Stones. Well, I wasn't shooting. I was a Steadicam operator on it. Working on a Rolling Stones video. So I would say, yeah, I mean, I guess in a weird way, it would be the Stones.
Nice.
I don't know if you karaoke, but if you were to karaoke, you were forced to, or maybe you enjoy it, is there a particular song that you would sing, or do you have a go-to?
Gosh. You wouldn't want to hear me sing. I think I don't. I think I'm tone deaf or something. I don't know, something out of either the first or second album from Coldplay.
I could see that. You could do some Sound of Music numbers.
God, no, please.
I don't think you'd match Julie Andrews, but I'd like to see it. I'm just
no.
So in a similar
candle to her,
yeah, a foot candle even. In a similar note, what would be, say you're coming out for a TED Talk to talk about cinematography, or say you're coming out to Bare Knuckle Bucks, the director from The Fight Machine, what would be your walkout music, your entrance music? What would hype the crowd up for Eric O to come out and do his thing?
Oh my gosh, that's a good question. Gosh, when you say that, all I can what just pops into my mind is the wrestling music from the 80s and 90s, the WW. I guess they're now called WWE. That when you say walkout music, that just instantly pops into my head. As for a specific song, I couldn't begin to even tell you. I would have to think about that one.
I'd say Real American, except you're a Malaysian by way of Canada. So I don't know if that would fit you so well.
All right, we'll go to the next question, which may also be kind of hard depending on how decisive you are. Are you familiar with the game F, Marry, Kill, where you have three options and you have to choose which one or no?
Not really, but I'll take a crack at it.
All right. So I'm going to give you three different Toronto food options, and you're going to choose which one you want to marry, which one you want to kill, and which one you'd like to take to bed. Which I know sounds weird when we're talking about food. All right. So tourtière, ketchup chips, and poutine.
I would say marry tourtière. No, I would say marry poutine, kill the ketchup chips, and sleep with tortilla.
Nice. You were pretty decisive about that.
So you currently split your time between Canada and Spain and have even lived in Asia, as we talked about. What is your favorite and least favorite place that you've lived in?
I would say, you know what, every place, this is kind of maybe is a bit of a cop-out, but I've enjoyed every place I've lived in. I mean, there's always good and bad, but I would say I like everything equally. I don't have a least favorite. There are places that I probably would not want to live, and I'm okay to go see, like, for example, maybe Jakarta, because it's just the traffic and the congestion can get to be a little bit too much. But, all the spots I've lived in, Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, Toronto, Ottawa, Barcelona, Mallorca, I've spent a lot of time there. I've even spent a lot of time in London. I like them all. I like that attitude. I always like to say I'd travel anywhere, because if anything, you're going to get to experience something new. And I think that there's always a redeeming quality about at least spending time in any place. But I get it. There's some places that feel like home and some places that don't. Barcelona, you mentioned. Do you have a favorite local spot to eat? Oh my gosh, there's so many restaurants in Barcelona I used to have a favorite spot, Cervecera Catalan. It's very typical pinchos and tapas kind of thing. And, we used to bring a lot of our friends and people who were visiting there. I would say, yeah, probably with that. But there's so many great restaurants in Barcelona. That's, my wife and I are still discovering them, every time we go out. We try to now actually not go back to the same place twice, just because there's so many. Another one is Champagnet. It's I think it's been around since 1950s or something like that. It's still owned by the same family. And it's fantastic. Food's fantastic.
Nice. As a seasoned traveler, and you just named off many places you've lived and visited, what is a destination, be it a city, country, or region, that is on your bucket list still to travel to that you've not yet visited?
Places like Ladakh, which is in on the border of Nepal. That's definitely on my bucket list. My wife's Italian. There's a few Amalfi Coast. I still haven't been, and she's like, I'm going to take you. That's definitely on my list. My wife and I love traveling, and we're always trying to find, there's so many undiscovered spots, but she loves Asia. I love Asia. And the great thing about Europe is that, everywhere, everything's so close. It's not like Canada. You drive for 4 hours, you're still within Ontario. You drive for 4 hours in Europe, you've crossed into 3 countries already, kind of thing, right? So, yeah, I would say, Ladakh. I've been in Nepal. Ladakh and Tibet, I would say, are up there on my bucket list.
Last question, and then you've made it through the rapid fire 15. What would be your dream project to make? Maybe there's a photograph that's inspired you, or a genre that you haven't tackled yet, or a time period.
I would love to make a period piece. I've always loved period pieces, and, I would love to make a period piece because, it's just something that I find very intriguing, because, something that I would embrace also is it's truly filmmaking at its finest, in a sense of you're recreating something from the past, from everything, from all the details, from wardrobe to styling, and I love that. Another genre that I do, one of my favorite genres is sci-fi. Love sci-fi too, and I've yet to shoot a true sci-fi film.
You hear that, Sean?
I hear sci-fi.
Aaron
period
and Cameron
piece
have
is what I hear.
have to get a sci-fi project in the works.
Man, I'd love a sci-fi.
Barry Lyndon with spaceships sounds good to me.
Yeah, exactly.
No, Eric, we appreciate those answers and all the good sage advice and insight about cinematography from the first half here. We were grateful to make this work. You're actually talking to us from Spain, so it was a nice needle thread for all of us to have like a time zone and an hour little block here that worked out for everybody. So once again, appreciate the time, appreciate the answers.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I learned a lot by hearing your stories, and even, I'm not necessarily a cinematographer, but, I've done pretty much every position on set at one time or the other. And I always feel like there's something to learn and a new perspective from each person. And a lot of what you said translates really to anyone on set and even outside of the film business as well. Being kind and considerate and thinking about how you interact with others and respecting them as individuals is key. And so it was just a delight to hear from you today.
Thank you very much. No, and I appreciate the time you took to make this work for me and to have me on your show.
Yeah, certainly. We're glad to do it. And please look for coming soon. They're on the festival circuit now, The Fight Machine and The Breach later this fall. Sorry about the Demon. He's a busy man. He's in high demand based on sort of the stories he told. He's good people, so people keep calling him back for gigs. So we're happy to have had him on one of the Paper Street Pictures productions here, and I'm sure we'll run into him again on another one down the road here. So yes, once again, Eric, thank you so much for the time.
My pleasure.